during this broadcast. Mute my phone there so I don't have an echo. And it's been a long time coming to have you wonderful people on the channel. I say you are, in my opinion, the only group of individuals on the island that I'm aware of that are conducting this type of independent research and investigation into the Lahaina fire, and have done a very amazing, diligent job. And I'm not going to steal your thunder, but I know there's lots that you want to share with the people that are watching, hopefully from all over the world. My goal has been since the very beginning of this is to create awareness. Obviously, the mainstream media has completely not paid attention, and the narrative that they have shared, I believe, has been amazingly inaccurate and shallow. And I believe as we approach the upcoming anniversary of the fire, it's very important that we shine a light on this community and what has happened here so that the truth will come out. And ultimately, the people that were affected by this fire will be made whole. And I even believe that there's a path for the county of Maui, who's going to bear the burden for this cost, including us, the taxpayer, hopefully to get some reparations when the truth actually comes out. So I think this is in everyone's best interest to get to the bottom of what happened here. And I'm so glad, Paul and Bruce and Kathy and Steve, that you guys are all doing this in the background voluntarily and with very limited sourcing and funding, and really just doing it from the kindness of your heart. So thank you so much for being here today, and I'm looking forward to a good discussion. And like I said, I'll be monitoring the chat to the best of my ability. So if you're out there watching and you've got a question, please hit me in the chat, and I'll do my best to feather those in as possible, assuming the technology works. So with that, let's get kicked off. Paul, I know you're sort of the leader of the band, so to speak. Maybe give us a little bit of background on how you came to Maui and how you are uniquely qualified to lead this effort.
Well, first of all, thank you, Eric, and thank you so much for all the work you've done in getting the message out and making it so that it's consistent and in the collective consciousness as much as possible. Even though mainstream media has shut this off, we continue to uncover a lot of data and information. And joining with me is one of my partners, Bruce Douglas, and Dr. Kathy Forte, and Dr. Steve Moran. We also have a large number of people who are participating. We have Donna Thompson, who is a researcher, Mike Yellen, who's helping us with all the legal aspect of things. And we have Bodhi Bachenko, who's been doing amazing work in terms of research and digging into this. So we're really, and then there's so many other people who've been involved. I mean, there's Ann Williams and Spice and so many other people. So I just want to start off by acknowledging that this is a team effort. This is a community effort. And the way that we started was shortly after the fire, many of us realized that this was not a natural fire. Our gut told us that, we have to do some investigation and digging. And there were many people who felt this way. And we gathered together and we started to take this data and information and put it together as in a repository. And as we kept on doing that, more and more people sent their data and information. And as we started to get this data into different categories, we saw that, again, something was not right. There were many anomalies, things that just normally does not happen in any type of fire. And when we went to, so far we went to 7 different fire captains and fire chiefs, and we showed them that data and information, and they all said the same thing. This is more than just a natural fire. So what we've been doing is continuing that research and going and digging deep into what actually has occurred. And again, what we'll do is we'll share different aspects of our process in terms of, first of all, I'll go and give just a general overview of our approach and what we're doing with this investigation. And then Steve will then go into photo analysis. He has a lot of expertise in doing that type of analysis. He worked for NASA, so he really understands how to do analysis, forensic analysis into videos and photographs. And we have Bruce Douglas, who's been in the burn zone with me a whole bunch of times, and we collect samples, and we really started to go into a lot of different things. He has a lot of expertise in terms of weather and weather anomalies. And then Dr. Kathy Forte is also helping us then with the actual legal aspects and all the FOIA requests. We have 22 of them that we have out. So again, we're really digging and going after it full steam ahead. So I'm going to share some slides just to give some perspective. And so let me just get over here and.
Hey, Paul. Do you
Yes.
mind sharing a little bit about your background and how you've been involved in this type of work in the past?
Sure. My background is that I have a master's degree in mechanical engineering. I have another degree. Let's see here. I have another degree in also electrical engineering. And I've been doing work. I used to be involved with hazardous and oil chemical spills. So I used to do a lot of analysis, go into spill sites. And then I was involved with the 9/11 Truth Movement and was very much involved overseeing groups there in that. So do you see my screen, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is our group that we formed a while back. And I just wanted to start by just going over some of the reports that have actually been produced so far. So right now we have this report. These reports have been released in the springtime. The last one was in June. This one here is with the fire department. This one here is with the police department. And the main one that has been released is with the Attorney General. And I just want to point out that this group here, UL means Underwriter Laboratories, they are the same engineering group that did analysis on the tower collapse on 9/11. And it's been shown from whistleblowers that they were fabricating data and information to come up with a theory called pancake theory. And what we're concerned about is that they're omitting data and information to come up with theories that really don't reflect the truth and what truly happened. So as we go through this, again, we'll be looking at just the facts, the data, and how then some of this was omitted. There are over 20 omissions and rebuttals that we have in these reports. And first of all, let's just start by, this Underwriter Laboratories report saying that, first of all, there was a pressure gradient drop. So this is when the fire was hitting. This is Hurricane Dora, which is some 600 miles to the southwest. And then we have to the north, we have this high pressure zone. They said that a pressure gradient created then these high winds that we experienced. But then when you go look at the actual high winds, what happened on the 8th is that in this whole area, upcountry and North Shore and South Shore, this whole area, central Maui, was calm. It was still. There was hardly no breeze at all. But then as soon as you went into West Maui, again, there was the whole different type of dynamic happening with the wind and intensity of the winds. And just to show you, there was so many. Let's see if we can do something with the, here we go. So we have so many wind cyclones that occurred on that day. We have documented some that were over a mile offshore. And again, with the intense winds, it was the main driving force of the fire itself. So again, this was totally omitted. None of this was acknowledged. And you can see that what their story is that it was a single source fire. It was basically, there was a fire that occurred early in the morning, and then it was put out by 9:30, and then they're saying that by 2:55 it restarted and swept through here and made these strange routes, even though the wind was driving very strongly from the mountains to the ocean. For some reason, they're saying that it was also spread in this way. We can go into some of the data and information that we've collected that also shows that this is not, this is suspicious. Just as the vehicles. Here's some things that they did not even mention. This was right next to light brush in a large driveway. And you can see how this vehicle was totally destroyed in the front part. And yet when you look at the actual light brush here and the Quonset hut and these buildings were totally fine. And you can see in the back here, this large parking lot that it was on. Again, it just doesn't make sense when you look at it very logically, but these things were totally omitted in these reports. Just as the trees were also totally omitted in the reports, where we have trees that have burnt way down into the root system, and yet the outer bark is untouched. And I know, Eric, you saw many trees like this also in the burn zone. There were some trees that we saw that had pukas that gets into the cracks and burns the trees like this from the base out. But when we look at that, when we look at the root system, it wasn't burnt out. But when we go to one parking lot, for example, and we started to look at 7 trees that were all burnt out of the base, all the upper parts of the tree and the limbs were not burnt. In fact, there were actual leaves on the trees itself. But yet, when we dug down deep into the root system of the trees, we could go 1.5 feet of just ash. And within that, I found some phregulites. These are basically clay that was condensed into rock. It was melted into rock. And again, Bruce will go into some of the strange anomalies that, again, bring suspicion as to high energy weapons that could have been used. And the way that we're going about our investigation is that we are using the guidelines for fire and explosion investigations. And as we do that, there are 50 anomalies, rebuttals, and omissions, the total that we're looking at. And right now, we're really focused on just 20 of them at this point in time, and we're producing videos. So we have an introduction video that we did. There's one on vehicles that we also put out, and Eric, you have posted, and we just have one on the trees also that we just did a few days ago that we put out. So again, we'll have more videos that we'll be producing with our team as we move forward. And that'll include the weather and also the selected route of the fire and potential arson points. There's many other things that we'll be going into as we continue this analysis and dig into it. But what I'd like to do is just give you a perspective of how we're going about this and the many people who are participating and working on different aspects of this. Next, I'd like to share the screen with Steve Moran. And Steve, are you there? Did we lose Steve? Okay.
I don't see him on the screen.
Steve.
Hey, Paul, while we're looking for Steve, can I just ask a clarifying question real quick?
Sure, please do.
Back to your, when you opened up, you talked about how Underwriter Laboratories omitted something about the wind. I didn't quite make the connection there because I know the story, the official story is that Dora, that was 500 or 600 or 700 miles to our south, somehow they're claiming is responsible, besides climate change, of course, somehow is responsible for the wind that caused the spreading of the fire, if you will. So what part of that was omitted by UL?
So there were several aspects. First of all, when we look at the wind cyclones, that was omitted. When we start to look at some of the anomalies that Bruce will talk about also, that was not included in there. When we look at also the strange differentiation in terms of the winds, where most of Maui was actually calm on the 8th. But as soon as you go into West Maui, the winds picked up to 60-mile-an-hour gusts.
Yeah.
So again, very strange that how can this pressure system drop that is actually 1,400 miles apart, that they created this pressure drop that concentrated wind just in the Lahaina area and not in the rest of Maui.
Yeah.
So again,
if that theory were to hold, the wind would have to have been high winds on the rest of Maui. You'd have to go over the West Maui Mountains and back down again, creating a trough into there. but were no winds on the rest of the island on that day. It was very light winds. I mean, it was a little bit strong, but it was nothing big like it was the day before. And that totally debunks, like, where did that wind come from? It wasn't coming over the mountain back down again, you know. Was it being generated right there within Lahaina itself as some sort of circular pattern making the wind? Because it certainly wasn't coming from the rest of the island.
So, as for those of you watching that maybe aren't familiar with Maui and the geography here, first of all, we are considered the wind surfing capital of the world. So if there's ever a place in the world where there's a lot of people studying the wind every day, it's Maui, because these guys want to go out, they want to go kiting, they want to go, windsurfing. So the on a normal day, right, we have got the trade winds. The trade winds typically come from the northeast, and Lahaina is called, it means cruel sun. And the reason it means cruel sun is because I lived there full time for most of my 13 years here, is that it's just hot. And why is it so hot in Lahaina? Because there's never any wind. I mean, there is not a skiff of wind in Lahaina pretty much year round. So what's so interesting about this particular day, I live in Kaanapali. Now, Kaanapali is right about where the wind starts to come around the West Maui Mountain. So next time you're in Lahaina, if you're in Lahaina, the town itself, and you look out into the ocean, you can actually see the shape of the mountain in the ocean. So it sits in the wind shadow of the West Maui Mountain. So you can see that wind shadow out there almost every single day, because the predominant winds are coming from that direction. So there's no wind in Lahaina ever. And so then as you get to about Kaanapali Parkway, that's about the first place where those trade winds start to kind of make their way around. And same with Oluwalu to the south. It's about where the trade winds, and it can be very powerful because that's where it's creeping around. So what was so interesting about this day is all the wind was basically focused in the town of Lahaina, coming from the mountain towards the ocean. And so just like what Bruce said, it would logically, then you would have that massive wind happening over in Waikapu and Wailuku and Kahului, but that wasn't the case. So it seemed like it was almost isolated. And then I was in Kaanapali that day, and yes, it was breezy here, don't get me wrong, there was definitely some wind, but it was much stronger in Lahaina than it was in Kaanapali, much stronger. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is the fact that there was moments supposedly when the wind shifted direction, which is very interesting. All day long, I saw it going from the ocean, from the mountain to the ocean. And so you would think, what's in danger is everything that's in that path. So it started Lahaina Luna and went straight to Front Street, but then somehow later on in the day, the wind, quote unquote, shifted to the north and then caught Wahikuli on fire. But that to me is very interesting, because I never saw, you could see the plume was going straight towards the ocean. And so it's just very unusual. And also, if a hurricane was causing the wind, you would think it would then be a Kona wind. With Kona is what we call when the wind switches and it's no longer coming from the northeast, it's coming from the southwest. You would think if there was a hurricane down there causing the wind, it would have been an onshore wind, but it was an offshore wind. So those are some of the observations that I had just as a person just walking around looking at this thing. So it doesn't make any sense that they're blaming this hurricane that was so far away.
Well, that's just it. And when we talk to meteorologists, they say the same thing, that Hurricane Dora had no influence really on the winds that occurred on the 8th. But yet, when we go into the reports, we find very interesting things from the, again, Underwriter Laboratories, the official government report, where they are somehow gathering data information saying that there was a pressure drop. And when we go look at the data from the, again, it's very questionable. There's no quotes from actual meteorologists. These are statements that are made from the Weather Bureau that they just took clips of. Also on social media they used also. So that's how they got their data to prove their very questionable conclusion as to how the winds were generated. Again, when we look at some of these anomalies that we'll continue to look at as we move forward, again, it raises a lot of questions. And when we start to look at also at the specific videos and photographs, we start to find some very, very interesting things. as we start to do more careful analysis. So, Steve, you want to just give us a little bit of a PowerPoint in terms of, and look at some of the research that you've been doing in the analysis of these photographs.
Sure. Give me a second to share the screen here.
Hey, Steve, while you're working on that, if I could just encourage everybody that's watching this right now, if you could please do me a favor and share it on your social network, share it to your text messages, share it by email, share it to someone that's across the street from you. No question, the channel's been shadow banned. It's pretty crazy. I had thousands of subscribers that were unsubscribing, even though my view count was going up. So please share this video while it's going live, and even after, if you're watching this as a recorded version, please share the video. And also, if people want to help Maui Community Investigation Group, there's a link in the description of this video if you want to go there and see a lot of this that they've presented in a very efficient way. And also, if you want to contribute and help the cause, they're definitely in need of some funding to help with the legal battle.
So go
Okay,
ahead, Steve.
can everyone see the screen? Very good. So here's the agenda for this part of the discussion. It's split into 4 parts. The first one is an analysis of extracted images from video recorded near the Kaiaulu o Kupuohi apartment complex on August 8th. We have 6 different videos that show images from that apartment complex, and we'll go into those in a little more detail. The second is a scaling and alignment analysis of 2 extracted photographic images from Mala sailboat video on August 8th. These were taken by Roger Curley, who has a YouTube website called Mr. Hypnotical. The third one is an examination of unprocessed and DVE processed Hurricane Dora GOES West 10.3 micron satellite images. By the way, DVE is what I call my proprietary imaging and processing computer suite of algorithms. DVE stands for Dynamic Visibility Enhancement. Number 4 is just a couple of slides where we'll examine a human body image extracted from street video recorded on August 9th. So let's get started. So out of those 6 videos, because you really have to examine video images one at a time to make sure that you're not missing transients. What I'm about to show you is one of those cases where we have detected something that would have totally escaped our detection if we had not done this. It's necessary, but it can be difficult because in that suite of videos, I extracted over 8,000 individual images. And you can go through them pretty fast. And a lot of times these transient anomalies will stick out and you can identify them. And so what I'm about to show you is 12 such images. They're not sequential images in the video, so that means they're not separated by 33 milliseconds in time. But there are a number of them that establish tracks, dynamics, and structure of descending and maneuvering aerial objects going through the smoke. But before we do,
So
let's take a quick look.
let's get to it.
Sorry, Paul?
Just stay with the images. Good.
This is the apartment complex. On the left, this is what it looked like the day after the fire, and then in total destruction. The people who were shooting these images were in this region and down here. The images that you're going to see were taken from this area right here. And there's what the destroyed apartment complex looks like. What you're going to see in these images, just to get your situational awareness up, is you're going to see the concrete drain channel that leads to the Coahoma Stream outlet. Let's see here. These are all the homes that were destroyed by Maui Street. And you're going to see each and every one of these homes pre-destruction in the videos. I mean, excuse me, in the extracted images from the videos. So here's the first image. It's number 328 out of this particular video. And I've circled an anomalous object. And the way this presentation works is what I have done is cropped, enlarged, and rescaled the intensity distribution around that object region. So the image down here has one anomaly. There it is enlarged, and it's in this individual frame number 328. Now, what we do is, as we step through these images, we establish a track. So this is the first arrow in the track, and it is 66 milliseconds into the descent of these objects. We go to the next image, which is 332. We're coming down. You can see the image here expanded. That's 132 milliseconds into the drop. Now we're 165 milliseconds in. Excuse me. Here you can see what the expanded image looks like. I said there are 4 objects here. I see one here. This may be one. We see a sequence here, but I've treated this as one. This is a little bit arbitrary in establishing numbers, but it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4 objects here that comprise this particular detection that we see up here. As we go down into the next one, this is 396 milliseconds into the drop. Here are the 2 objects that you can see. There's one here and there's one right there. And this is what they look like, cropped, enlarged, and linear scaled. 462 milliseconds into the drop. Here's what it looks like now. I can see 1, 2, 3 objects. They may all be part of one, but they seem distinct. So label them as 3. And you can see the track starting to evolve. 495 milliseconds into the drop. Here's 3 objects, 1, 2, and 3. 28 milliseconds into the drop. And you can see we're developing a very interesting track here. 3 objects, 1, 2, and 3, possibly more, but that's what I established initially. 528, you can see the object. Now, it's interesting because here we are at 693 milliseconds. So what I've done here is made an attempt to find out what the velocity of this object is. So I estimate the length of this segment of the track at about 32 to 40 feet. How did I do that? Well, in this house, there's a sliding glass door. And we all know that those doors are about 8 feet tall. And if I measure the screen distance here, I can establish a correlation between screen and length, and that gives me this number, 32 to 40 feet, depending on this whether or not this is 0.2 inches or 0.25 inches. The time from here to here is 165 milliseconds. That gives me a velocity of 194 to 242 feet per second, or 132 to 165 miles an hour.
So if I could just, Steve, in this analysis too, I think that we just need to again, I guess everyone can appreciate the level of analysis that you do and how much you go into the depth of each one of these things. But to show that we have these different types of anomalies happening where we have these white streaks, light streaks in different aspects of the smoke analysis.
He's going to get that next.
Yep. So why don't we
Let's
go to
move
the next
forward.
one? Yeah, let's move forward to the next one, Steve.
Okay,
And,
well, we're ready to do that because I'm at the last slide. There's the last one. You can see the three objects. There's four objects.
Great.
Okay,
And
so
we're just show the two shots, okay, on that.
Yeah, we got to be quick on this, Steve.
Okay, and let's just go right to the
There it is.
two shots. There we go.
okay, this is one of the Mala sailboat images, and I have circled the anomaly of interest right here. And this is a wide field shot taken with a cell phone camera. This is a close-up of the same anomaly. And so what I have done is I have taken the previous display. I have enlarged, cropped, and co-registered with image 2 so that I can do the following. So what we can do is toggle between these two and watch the anomaly grow in length. So it
again,
grows in length by about 50%.
So these are strange things that we still have not been able to identify, and we do need experts to come in and help with the analysis of some of this. But as you can see, as we take time to look closely at what occurred offshore along the side of the smoke screen and also within the fire itself, we keep on finding many of these anomalies. And Steve, why don't you just go to the next one in terms of the weather? You just, or why don't we just go, instead of the weather, why don't we just go right to the body, okay? Because Bruce will talk a little bit more about the weather. And,
okay, this is the last slide. And what it shows here on the left is a cropped and enlarged image from a video taken the day after the fire. And it shows a face down body in decomposition. And you can see that there's a significant amount of material that looks like it has come from the body on the roadway. And then if you look on the right, excuse me, that is the DVE processed image. And what it shows is a very fine detail in the pattern of the material that covers the body. And what it shows is just some amazing detail on what it looks like as it decomposes. Here, right here, we see two bones.
I think what's most interesting about this is not the way a body should look after it's gone through a fire. It doesn't look like you put the chicken in the oven and you overcooked it and it's burnt from the outside. It more looks like you put the chicken in the microwave and you cooked it too long and it turned into a white powdery type of substance. And what's of remarkable interest here is the cornrows of this individual in his hair is still there. The hair didn't burn, but the rest of the body turned into a powdery-like substance with the rest that's around it. It's very resembling of what you see after Hiroshima and Nagasaki from the blast there, where bodies were toasted. It looks more like something that was microwaved and not a body that was cooked from an intensive convection fire. And with the cornrows and the hair still intact, that's like, can anyone please explain how a convection fire, caused that to happen? This is an extreme anomaly.
And
Reminds
every
me a
fire
little bit.
captain,
Oh, go ahead.
every fire captain and fire chief that we spoke to all said the same thing, that you do not get this type of results from a normal fire. There's something else. Many of them said it looks like a microwave that could have happened, but Bruce will go into a little bit more of maybe some of the different types of energy weapons that could create this type of result.
Well, it reminds me a little bit of the white dog that I found inside of the grill of a burned out vehicle. The vehicle was completely melted, but inside the front grill was a white little dog, and the hairs of the dog, of course, the dog was not alive, but the hairs of the dog were not even singed, but like the inside of it was obviously, not there, but the hair was completely fine, which I found completely unusual.
Yeah, there's only two technologies that could do something like that, would be microwaves or plasma wave technology.
Great. So thank you, Steve. And
Steve, would you go
sharing
back
the
to
slides.
the slide of the weather in
Sure.
your presentation there?
There's your original and there's the processed.
There's the process. So
Which one would you like to see?
let's look at the process because it enhances what we're seeing there. And because it's hard to see on my video, and working now, processing the whole video so you can really see it. But what you see is Hurricane Dora moving around, at 600 miles south of the islands, minding its own business, having a very small, tight thing, staying at 10 degrees latitude like natural hurricanes are supposed to do. Stays in a certain zone at 10 degrees latitude as it goes across the ocean, missing the Hawaiian Islands. And you can see the troposphere, the lower clouds around it are all steady around the hurricane like it usually is because it's concentrating it there. But then up in the upper right-hand corner, you see this strange point source that's creating this wave pattern of clouds that's going out from all directions and creating wave after wave of cloud coming toward the Hawaiian Islands, ending at the Hawaiian Islands and not going past it. It's as if someone was taking a drum beat and moving the clouds up and down like this in order to create that pattern. The video I have, they say, doesn't show it as well as it's enhanced, as you can see. But when you play this in real time, you see that whole pattern of wave after wave of clouds coming at us, starting the day before. So, Steve, you want to stop your screen share?
Sure.
I can put that up if you want, Bruce, on screen share. Or are you going to do that one? Okay.
I'm gonna do a screen share here. Let's just screen share because I'm taking things a bit out of order, but the
I
wave
have the
pattern.
enhanced. Yeah, I have the enhanced one too, if you want.
Oh, we're gonna play the enhanced one. Play the enhanced.
Okay. That'll be sure.
And what's interesting to note is we do have the technologies to create these wind patterns called ionospheric heaters. The technology has been around since the 70s, where you can shine energy on the ionosphere up where the ions are, where the ozone is, and heat it up with radio waves frequencies, and then turn that off and drop it back down again. And you can create, low pressure wave patterns below it. And we have the technology to do that. It's been around since 70s, 80s. A lot of people know about the heart antennas in Alaska are capable of it. But let's play this video and see how this enhanced comes out. And then you can see Hurricane Dora moving down below. And in the waves above, there's this anomaly above it, where from a point source, which you can see to the upper right, the northeast of the Hawaiian Islands, you can see that point source there creating a wave after wave of patterns coming at us. And this was the day before and the day after. These are trade winds coming at us. Had nothing to do with the hurricane below. That would have been Kona winds from the south. And this, of course, is not talked about. What's the source of these clouds? What's the source of this wave pattern coming at us? And if this was in a continuous loop, you'd see it a little more. But okay, you want to stop the screen share, and I'm going to go to what I've got here. This is the HARP antennas in Alaska that can create ionospheric heaters that can do this very sort of thing. And this is what looked like the day before with these wave after wave of clouds coming at us. And I watched hurricanes. I try to figure out how weather patterns get engineered. And I saw this strange, like I've never seen before, this line of clouds coming at us one after the other the day before. This is on the 8th, that pattern lightens up, and this strange anomaly happens over the islands and blocks out the pattern on the day of the hurricane. So you don't actually see it, but you see those same wave patterns. It's a little more intense than the day before, but it did lighten up on that day. And you would expect these clouds, this trade winds, reason why Lahaina's and the thing when we have trade winds, which is what we had that day of the fire, as you can see from this, Lahaina's in the pattern that hides the winds. But the next day on the 8th, when the actual hurricane happened and the winds lightened up, it was still trade winds, and Lahaina would have been in the shadow of the wind pattern. The winds would have had to be super intense and come over the top of the mountain and back down again, which is what they try to say happened, but that's not what happened. We didn't have those sort of wind patterns to support that. And when I say what technologies do we have that can do it, this is the HARP antennas in Alaska, the ionospheric heater that can actually heat up the ionosphere and create low pressure sounds below it. We have these things all over the world in various shapes, used for weather modification.
Isn't there a HARP machine over on Oahu at the harbor?
Yeah, in fact, what we have, various HARPs can work together in unison and intensify the result, but we have this mobile HARP, the HARP dome, seen here in Honolulu Harbor coming in. And it's a massive structure with this huge dome on the top of it. And there's smaller domes like this at all sorts of military and other installations around that are also atmospheric heater units. This is not Doppler radar. This is atmospheric heater technology. And was this system used during a hurricane? I don't know. Certainly the patterns are shown there, but none of this, what generated those crazy winds from that direction has taken part in any of the weather patterns.
And what are the odds, by the way, that the day of the fire you can't actually see the image? It's blocked with that big black hole.
Another anomaly? Occasionally that happens. When the slides get blacked out. But why on the most important day did Hawaii get blacked out on the image? Other things not taken into account is arson points that happen. And it only took me about 5 minutes looking at Google Earth to realize that there's a lead point right here for the fires at the far south end of Lahaina, right alongside the highway. You can see this point source where the weeds were actually caught on fire from above. And if you look at it, you can see, this was taken a few weeks after the fire, where that point source right there, someone jumped out of the car, they lit the grass on fire alongside the road, and the winds, which as they whip around the Lahaina Poco, always go toward Lahaina. It's trade winds, so it's your standard type thing. And basically ignited this area right here, and people think that the fire then, jumped the highway here, but actually on the other side of the highway, we see another similar type point right there, where the weeds were started on fire, and it went on its merry way down, and started the fire on the other side. We all know the fire point up here in Lahaina Luna, which is what they try to say the fire started, but we have another, fire start area on the north side of the island, not caused from down power lines. There are no power lines over there.
And then also, it also jumped over where the bypass goes down. I spent a lot of time in that area trying to figure out how it made its way over to the Wahikuli neighborhood, and the fire would have had to actually go against the direction of the wind in order to cross probably the thickest portion of the bypass, right at the turn.
Right, more likely that area was started along here. There's a road along the top up here that anybody could have driven down and start the fire. I didn't find a start point because the fire just went right to the road and then stopped. There's no power lines. There's no ignition sources up there for the fire in that area. And it's more likely this brush fire was started because the winds were coming from the mountain down, were started along this area, and then it went down in. So you can see the fire here would have followed trade winds into Lahaina. The wind that was coming out of the valley, into Lahaina did the Lani Poco. And on the north end, a fire was started somewhere along that road. And this was, me looking for 5 minutes on Google Earth and seeing this whole pattern happen.
Also, you've got some new
Where we had that-
construction. You've got some new construction right there. I don't know if you can put that screen back up, Bruce, but there's a portion of homes that were just started their construction, and with exposed 2x4s, and completely bypassed that entire section of the like literally skirted right around that, and then went right down to the homes that are basically cinder block, and
Yeah.
but there was a just sort of miraculously bypassed this new construction. Also, the apartment building that you guys showed earlier, that one you would think was just built. It was so you're thinking the most recent fire retardant construction also had commercial fire suppression sprinkler system inside of it. You would think the odds of that burning would be pretty slim. And also, if you look at that whole area, Emerald Plaza, I made a video on that. How the fire could possibly even get to that location is very interesting, because you have this giant concrete canal that's probably 20, 30, 40 feet wide, and then a lot of metal buildings. You've got individual cars and boats that caught fire that were there was no fuel source for these particular cars and boats and buildings to catch fire, yet somehow they did. And a lot of people say, "Oh, Eric, there was embers that were blowing," but then you go down to the most sort of westerly point, where you've got the old Lahaina luau, right? Everyone knows the old Lahaina luau, probably the best luau on West Maui. They've got thatched roofs, like literally thatched dry roofs, and all of the embers were flying towards that particular point, yet that entire property survived. So the whole, any comments on how they say that can an ember land on a car, and then a car just incinerates, and the glass melts, and the rims melt, and the engine melts because of an ember from a grass fire lands on a car without any other source of ignition or continuous fuel?
No, that's not a logical way, because usually a fire will light the tires on fire. A grass fire will get the tires going, and then the tires start burning. That's the easiest thing. If the windows are down and ember happens to go inside a down window, but most people these days roll up the windows and lock their car. So the likelihood of that is pretty low. And what's even more an analysis here is, okay, what was the technology that could have done all this? And I think it's important to look at that. And we showed all these images of trees lit from the inside. Well, lightning strikes. Lightning is plasma energy that comes down. It's the most obvious example of plasma wave technology that Mother Nature provides us. And the energy comes down the tree, and when it grounds out at the earth, at the root, it lights the center of the tree on fire, and the tree burns from the inside out. So it's like only the inside of that catches on fire. And, when lightning hits, it'll light the inside of the tree on fire at the base and burn it. We found a total of 28 trees that had that same pattern to it. 7 of them, 8 of them in one parking lot. And we went around the whole burn zone, and we found 28 different trees that we documented, where the outside of the tree, just like you see this lightning strike right here, does it. So everyone wants to know what technology could have been used. And we don't know exactly what it was. We can't prove exactly what it was. But certainly, plasma wave technology, what's called directed energy weapons, is a possibility. Because if that were to come down and hit a tree, just like lightning, when it hits a tree, it's going to focus toward something of mass. Paul, would you pull up that one of the truck? The first one, right? It's on the Boko. And show that one, because that's a really obvious one. So when lightning comes down, it's going to find something with mass. If it hits a tree, it's going to ground out at the base and light the inside of the tree on fire, which is what we see from many photos. If it's coming down and sees a car, it's going to go toward the engine block because that's got the most mass to it. And if it, thank you. And so if it hits a car, it's going to, again, it's going to be attracted toward the area of the most lightning. Plasma wave technology, which is what directed energy weapons, is a subcategory of that, would operate in a similar sort of way. Its plasma energy is going to go toward grounding points. It's going to go toward the most mass. So if a plasma wave technology were to come down in this area, it would miss the houses and the quants and say, oh, there's a nice truck right there. In fact, let's aim it right toward let's be attracted toward the engine block. And you can see how this is anomalous because the back of the truck is unburned. The fuel source, which would have been the gas inside, did not ignite. The rear tires didn't even burn, but the front of this truck, the end right down to the engine block and the cab is completely melted, and if you look at the Quonset hut untouched, if you look at the house next to it, basically untouched, even the
light brush, this light brush also, and then also there were aerosol cans in here that were functioning just fine. So again, when you start to add up all these different points, especially this being the only material that was burnt around this was grass that was about 100 yards away. The rest was in this open parking lot here. So again, it just raises questions. And this was totally omitted in any of the reports by the government. They have not touched any of these anomalies.
And this truck was right at the beginning of the fire at Laniapoko when the brush fire first started interfacing, with the rest of the area. And
so, yeah, right in this area. And again, as Bruce was mentioning, look at the strange patterns of how the fire spread. And again, looking at arson points, we had also 4 different fire captains look at that, and they all said the same thing, that it's highly suspicious and that it does seem like there were arson points that need to be investigated. But yet, again, in the reports, none of that was touched. It was just a single source urban interface fire that was involved with all of this. And they were saying that there's nothing to look at, there's nothing strange about this fire. It was just an intense fire by the intense winds that created this, also with global warming as part of it too.
Yeah.
So,
hey, Paul, do you mind if I just do a quick Q&A session with you? And it's going to be a really quick Q&A session because you'll either say yes or no that it was included in the reports that you've read so far that are official. Just a quick yes or no. Because in my mind, and also for those of you watching, maybe you're not familiar with what happened on the events of August 8th, or all the different, or the totality of all of the anomalies or things that went wrong. But this might be a good opportunity for you to hear it very succinctly. But we can kind of cover 2 birds with 1 stone. Is you can let me know if this is something that was covered in the reports, because I know you've read every page. Are you okay with that?
sure.
Okay. All right. Cool. So, was it ever mentioned in any of the reports that there was an emergency proclamation put out by Josh Green, the governor, just a few weeks before the fire that had to do with housing and suspending rebuilding regulations in historic districts? Was there any mention of that whatsoever? Because to me, that's the very first anomaly.
I did not hear any of that in terms of the bills and legislation that was passed actually prior to, or even Josh Green going and talking about smart cities, going to the United Nations. None of that was in those
So
reports.
none of that was ever covered. So for you, those of you watching,
Yeah,
that
and Kathy, what are you confirm with that too? That because
That's
Kathy
correct. That
was.
So it's an interesting data point, but you're saying it was completely ignored, that just a few weeks in late July, before the fire, obviously, that Josh Green put out an emergency proclamation, like the kind of proclamation you would normally have if there was a hurricane or a tornado or a flood, but the emergency proclamation, which didn't make any sense. I'm a real estate agent, and it had to do with the need for housing, but yet it was an emergency proclamation. And for those of you that don't remember those from the C word, which I'm not going to say because we'll get censored, that allows the governor to basically enact or withhold any law at any time, but it also specifically referred to laws for building codes and things that has to do with the historic district, and most of Lahaina was a historic district, and so it just seems unusual that they wouldn't mention that, because that is, to me, a very important data fact, that the government actually sort of had an anticipatory law that was passed, or an emergency proclamation by the governor just a few weeks before the fire. So I'm glad that you clarified that. Number two, was it ever and I know this is a little bit of a facetious question, but was it ever noted that the area code for Hawaii is 808, and that there's a lot of pride in that 808 all day, and we love 808? Was there any mention that this fire also happened on 808? I know I'm sure the answer is no, but I want the audience to know that there's no mistakes, I think, and this fire did happen on 808, and that is our area code.
Again, it's very strange, when you look at numbers like 9, 11, and things like that. Again, it is all very strange.
Okay.
And again, as we look at the anomalies and we start putting it together, it creates a very bizarre picture in many ways.
Was there any mention that the power was completely lost to the west side of Maui starting somewhere between 3:30 and 4 a.m. the morning before the fire started? Was there any mention of that, complete loss of power?
I don't recall any. There was, yes, they did timeline reports, and in the timeline reports, they talked about some of the power outages and things like that within that.
Okay. Was there mention of? I'm sorry.
Kathy, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I guess you could say in the early morning hours because of the Lahaina Luna fires. But they were a little sketchy on that. Most of the reports, which I'll go into in a little bit, we'll get to that, were weak at best with information that would be definitive. It was like they phoned in the report.
Yeah. Did they mention that there was a fire that happened that morning at Lahaina Luna, and there was fires burning in Kula?
Yes.
They did mention that.
Yes.
Okay. Did they mention that a lot of the fire resources for Maui were sent to Kula?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, they
Really?
did, but they did. Yeah, they did mention that some of the resources were sent there. In fact, it's very interesting that when the fire peaked at 3:20 in Kula, that's when the fire really started taking off in Lahaina at that time. So it was, at a peak time where they were demanding as many resources as could be spared.
Yeah.
And just a note, I found another arson point alongside of the road in Kula, obvious arson point that starts alongside the highway in the brush and then spreads out from that point, which we go into in other videos.
Okay. Was there mention of the fact that there was no water available to fight the fire in Lahaina town?
There was mention of water and also, and again, when we spoke with some of the firemen, that they said that in the residential areas, especially, there was lack of water, but in the areas where there was more shops and that area, that where the malls were, and there was water there.
Okay.
A lot of the hydrants did not have it, and usually the fire department usually goes around there and is informed of fire hydrants that are not working or having adequate pressure of water. So that's something our fire department, which was part of some of our FOIA requests as well. And if you have any more, otherwise I'll get into that aspect.
I've got just a few more. I just got a few more questions. By the way,
go ahead.
I've looked at some of the fire hydrants, especially in the Emerald Plaza, and they're pretty high tech. I mean, they've got a lot of pipes going to them. They look what appear to be meters next to them. So it would be really interesting to see. A lot of people, the excuse, even on Joe Rogan, when he asked the question about the water, they use this excuse about water rights, and they made the call for water. So the assumption is almost like, they were fighting the fire for so long that they ran out of water and they needed more, when the fact is they never had any water. I never saw a video of a fireman holding a hose spraying a fire. I don't know if that exists. Maybe it does, but I've never seen it. And so the excuse of not having water because of some water rights phone call to me is like a straw man. It was a complete story that was made up. The fact is, and I've talked to firefighters that said that there was no water, and even the backup water system that they have, which pulls on groundwater, is run by a special pump, and it was out of fuel that day. Someone forgot to put the fuel in there. So I think it's interesting to note that here you have a town that's burning, and not a single drop of water is available to firemen to fight.
Well, I do have some videos of firemen actually using water to fight the fire. So that did exist, and there was some firefighting that did occur. But again, in many areas, as you mentioned, Eric, there was no water or very little water. There was some water in a few areas in the burn zone that remained till 11 p.m. that night. So again, it was scattered in terms of what hydrants had water and which ones didn't.
Okay. Was there mention in the reports, because this to me is one of the most important things that happened or didn't happen, was there mention of the fact that there was a fire, a brush fire in Lahaina, Luna, that was put out by the fire department? Then they put out a message that said 100% contained, which put everybody at ease. Was it mentioned in the reports that the fire department actually left, completely evacuated that area, even though at that time there was very high winds? It seems to be against every wise protocol to leave an area, because everyone knows fire goes underground, it can be in the roots, could easily spark up again. Was there mention in there that the fire department completely left that field and just took off? Was that mentioned in the reports?
Yeah, it was mentioned in terms of the timelines and what occurred. And what they're looking at is that this is a restart. That's what they're claiming it as, so that it was a fire that was supposed to be put out by 9:30 a.m., but at 2:55 p.m., it reignited, supposedly.
What I find so interesting, for those of us that were in Lahaina that day, and I don't know if any of you actually were in Lahaina. I know you guys live in Haiku and different areas, but I was there that day, right? I live here, and I recall it like everyone knows where they were on 9/11. I came out of a showing at Maui, El Dorado at 10:30 in the morning, and it was actually was like an inspection. It wasn't a showing; it was an inspection. But it was the first time my clients had seen the unit. It was under contract. Walk out of Maui, El Dorado at 10:30, and I look towards Lahaina. And at 10:30, I see a billowing black cloud of smoke that reminded me of 9/11. I mean, it was massive. It was like it took up a good portion of the sky. So I've never been able to reconcile this little brush fire that they've got completely extinguished at 9:30 a.m., but at 10:30 a.m. with my own eyes, I see a plume of black smoke that is alarming. And then the actual fire that they claim that took Lahaina town didn't start up until 3:30. So what was this giant black plume that I saw with my own eyes at 10:30 in the morning?
Well, I happened to be there at the exact same time.
Really?
Yes, at 10:30, because I had a picture or two, and that's the time, it was time stamped as that. And, I was coming from Kihei to go to an early lunch with a friend of mine. And not until we got, as we were riding along the ocean, the west side, I could see the wind cyclones in the water, and I pointed it out to my friend. And I said, "Wow, there was two of them there. I've never seen anything like this." And not until we got close to Lahaina, everything was still before then. Then you could feel the wind in the car battering you, and then I looked down at my phone to figure out what's going on here, and I got the SOS, meaning out of service. And so we couldn't find out what was going on. There was police blocking the road. We couldn't get into Lahaina. We tried every route we could get into Front Street. It was all blocked off. We stopped at a little place, and it was a little shopping mall. There was a Burger King there and a Walgreens, and looking for a bathroom. And, as I'm walking away, there's no bathrooms to be found there. A tree branch falls right behind me. And the wind was just whipping up out of it. After a while, we thought, something's not right here. We could feel the energy rolling in our head. We're both very sensitive to energy. And so something's not right. We took the long way around the island. And it's interesting because Bruce said, it was battered from that one side and only Lahaina got it. But on the other side of the island, which we had to go all the way around, there was no wind on that side of the island at all, the long way around. And so, it's sort of like really strange. It was all concentrated right in the Lahaina area because I called somebody when I finally did get service and got back to Kihei towards this. Someone said, well, I wish we had some wind here. It's been hot and still all day. So we know that it was just focused in that area, which is very unusual. And of course, everything you've heard from all of my colleagues here is very compelling and very bizarre and very defies logic. And, because I was there and I felt that something was really wrong, and I got out obviously before the big fires started, that's how I got into this, and I may not have the expertise. I'm a clinical psychologist, but didn't have the expertise like some of my colleagues here. But, I said, okay, I'll take on this FOIA thing because these are serious questions that these reports are not addressing, and I want to know them as well. So we sent them to 8 agencies. 4 were the federal. We sent them to FEMA, to FBI, to the Environmental Protection Agency, and to ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives. And then we sent it to FOIA requests, which obviously Freedom of Information Act requests to the state, the county, the fire, police, with all these in-depth questions that these after reports had never addressed. I mean, they just, like I said, it was a very weak report, and the real questions everybody's asking, they just blew off. Well, ATF denied it due to an ongoing investigation, which I think is their go-to excuse on most things.
And let me just say one thing. So we have 3 reports. There's a 4th one that will be coming out, and that'll be through ATF. We're still waiting, and that's why, as Kathy said, we didn't get the information because they said the investigation is still ongoing. But there's a lot of forensic data that we're trying to get. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I also submitted a bunch of FOIA requests as well and had not received anything.
So we also, Environmental Protection Agency, we only had one question from them out of all the questions we've asked people, and that was how come all these underground pipes were rupturing? And how deep, how the depth was underneath it, because that didn't make any sense to us either. And they denied having any information on the pipes whatsoever, so we didn't get anywhere with them. And then the county.
Let me just say that they did have information on the lateral pipes, but again, they didn't give us specifics in terms of the materials, how the depths in which they burst, and some of the specifics that we were asking for. Yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
So then the county denied us, basically saying, well, the police and the fire, they have that information, we really kind of don't. So they just kind of blew it off to the other agencies. So the state attorney general's office and the Maui Fire Department, they asked for additional time, which was not to be more than 20 days, which would make it next week at the end of July. Their additional days would be up. And we have heard nothing except that we know that they received it because we had them signatures signed for these documents. We have heard nothing from the FBI, the Maui Police Department, or FEMA. No response whatsoever. So nobody's even given us one answer to even one of our many questions. So, we have on our website, let's see if I can get it up here. Here it is. This is, can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. These are just a number of the questions. If you don't want to go down them, you can also, we asked about, a lot of them was the climate, weather, and wind anomalies, being very specific about the meteorological aspects. Then we asked for the climate anomalies about the unusual wind formations, the cloud formations, and so forth, and how the path of the fire spread against prevailing winds, the number of wind cyclones, that was all in there. We asked about, let's see if we can get the white haze and the particle haze on that, which I think was 4 or so forth like that. I'll just briefly go through this. If you want, you can read them in depth on the Maui Community Investigation.com website. Then we got into the infrastructure, asking them basically about why, cell phone service, when it was cut off, why the local emergency red alerts weren't working, and how come the sirens failed, the emergency sirens failed. Then we asked about the trees, referring to arborist reports inspecting the burns on the tree, and why some of them burned from the inside out, going all the way down to the base roots. That was important. You see, after each one, we said we sent it to Maui County, FEMA, ATF. Those were the particular ones, the same question. So then as we get into 8, so I think there was 7, these again go through all the looking for the fireproof documentation and temperatures. What would be the temperatures to ignite cars the way they were, especially if they weren't around combustible materials, the number of vehicles that were affected, and so forth like that. I mean, we really got into the nitty gritty. And then we asked about how they moved in a circuitous route, the fire around houses and so forth like that, which didn't make any sense to us as well. We asked them about the arson points. Then on 10, we did get into the coroner reports and asking about the human bodies, how the autopsies were done, documentation on certain areas where we found more bodies than, there was more bodies found than in other areas. And what their methodology was for determining who these deceased bodies were. So, the autopsy reports and so forth like that. Then we got into asking them for a lot of reports about the time of the fire, which, especially in the Maui Police Department, for the individual reports that each department put out, county, police, fire, and the dispatch records, which we didn't include in this one, but somebody else asked for the 911 records as well from people calling in. But the dispatch records would have been how they handled all that. Then we asked out who was on duty that day, what their jurisdictional posts were, what time the power was turned off at any time, at what times, and if they were temporarily turned back on. We did ask about 489 lateral pipes that ruptured at what depths, as Paul was referring to, the material and so forth like that. Then into 19, and we did ask about the water, pertaining to the water, how was that decision made to release the water? How much water was available? Why the hydrants weren't working? And then we got into why the exit roads were blocked. Who gave that information, and who to the dispatchers and so forth. We still to this day do not know who gave that order and why they were blocked. And of course, the people who did not comply were the ones that obviously lived to tell this tale. So then I think it's sort of like, okay, then we did ask about, did it have any footprints, the fire displayed any footprints of residual evidence of a potential, exotic technology like directed energy weapons, so forth like that, or EMP effects in the water on the boats. So you can see there, like I said, you can go back and look at that in depth. So we, and I'm sure we're all going to come up with even more questions as we find more evidence of strange things. I mean, we're just scratching the surface, it feels like, at this point. So people are going to say, well, what do you do if they don't respond to you? And we plan on next month in August doing a writ amendamus, which is going to bring it into the court system, which we're going to ask for a full transparency in a court of law. And that was our next possibility. But at this point, we really do call for anyone, any attorneys who want to see justice and transparency to, if they would like to help us on this, especially if they're licensed in the state of Hawaii, to come forward and let us know. Just give us at info@mauicommunityinvestigation.com, because we really need your help. All of us are doing this, on a shoestring or on our own money, to do some of these reports. And, we haven't gotten a cent from Maui Strong or any of those that have raised millions. And, and so many other people haven't as well. So, it's sort of like you're kind of wondering, who are they spending this money on? I mean, we want to get to the truth. We all are truthers. I know, Eric, you're a big truther, and Paul and Bruce and Steve, and many of us behind the scenes that are not on this call today. So we really appeal to you to be behind, because if they get away with this, if this is what we think it really is, they will continue to do this over and over again all over the world. And we're already seeing things like that in other parts of the world. I know that just my friend who was in the Ruidoso fires in New Mexico, and the whole town got pretty much wiped out. The next day, Ruidoso Strong was collecting money for everybody. So, it's sort of like we have to be really conscious and discerning of who's out there working a scam or trying to get money, and those who are really trying to get to the truth.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think it's a worldwide organized effort, but yeah, it's really scary. But thank you so much for all of your efforts and all those FOIA requests. I know that's a lot of work, and I believe it will be fruitful eventually if we stick with it.
And it may take time.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at what's happened with 9/11, and 23 years later, they're still uncovering data and information about what occurred on that day to try and get to the truth. But I think for us, as we keep on gathering more and more data on the fire, with Steve doing his analysis on the photographs and really digging into some specifics, and Bruce doing some different types of work, and Kathy and Mike Yellen helping on with legal. If there are people who can support us in any way in terms of their expertise, if they have expertise in exotic weaponry, for example, and understand the technologies and the footprints of these different technologies, that would be extremely helpful. As Kathy mentioned, if you're a lawyer and you want to help us out and participate, this could be our Alamo. In other words, this is a calling point of letting people know that there's something awry, there's something going on here from other power sources that we have to look at and really be consciously aware of.
And Paul,
and if they have knowledge of directed energy weapons, that kind of correlate with some of the pictures Steve has showed that might, kind of fill in the blanks for us. We'll work with you anonymously, because we know some people are just trying to protect themselves, and we understand that. So, get in touch with us, and we'll keep you anonymous, but we need to have some answers to what we're seeing.
And I know that there's people out there that are or could be whistleblowers, or they could have information, they could have videos, they could have, just data. I'll give you an example. I was told of a boat captain that was called on the morning after the fire to come help retrieve, bodies, basically. And then after that, a lot of NDAs had to be signed. He had videotape evidence of this. They took his camera equipment off of his boat. So there's people out there that I believe have information that could help uncover some of these things that happened during the fire. And I think having a repository such as Maui Community Investigation Group to give that information to, it's a safe place. It's, where you can remain anonymous. I think there's a call to action for anybody out there that has information that could help uncover the truth.
We have a couple of thousand videos in our repository at this point in time, and a lot of testimonies. And our goal and objective is let the facts, the data, the testimonies, the unbiased experts tell the story, instead of the story coming as a cover-up or some type of, strange, basically made-up story as to what exactly occurred. So again, as we can, really put the data out there and be very clear and put it out for everyone to see. I think that'll be a wake-up call for a lot of people as to what we're really being faced with at this point in time.
Hey, Paul, I'd like to just keep asking you a few more questions on my list here. I want to get through it because this is really my first opportunity. This is not scripted or pre-planned. I'm like, I want to pick your brain, and because we've been trying to put this meeting together for a long time. So, and I also think it's a point of clarification for people that are listening that may not know this information because you're watching somewhere on the mainland or somewhere in some other country and you have no idea what happened here. Some of these questions are going to illuminate in your mind how crazy it is what happened that particular day and the weeks following. So in the reports that you read, was there any mention that the morning of, before the fire started, like that morning, people that lived in West Maui had no use of their cell phone? Okay, you couldn't call anybody, you couldn't text anybody, you could receive a text message, but you couldn't send a text message, and your Wi-Fi at home didn't work. This is before the fire even started. That morning, we woke up to a blackout of communication. I don't know if anyone really knows that because other people don't get it. If you live in Kahului, if you're in Kula, if you're in Haiku, if you're in California, you're just used to this thing working. It just works. We woke up that morning and the phone didn't work. So now imagine you went to work that morning in Kaanapali and you're cleaning your hotel room for your job, or you're a janitor, or you're a maid, or you're a vacation rental expert, consultant. And then you find out that your house is under threat of being burned. And you try to call to see if your kids are okay because that was the last day of summer. Most people left their middle school age kids at home, or their high school age kids at home, or they left their elementary school kids at home with an in-law or a friend. So now you're at work, you're trying to find out if everything's okay back at the house, but you can't get a hold of anybody because your phone doesn't work. And then you try to go into town and you can't because the roads are blocked as they're making people go into the Waikuli neighborhood, which makes zero sense whatsoever. And I'll talk about traffic control and what happened that day. But was there any mention of the fact that on West Maui, your cell phone didn't work starting the morning of the 8th for the next 3 weeks? Was there any mention of that?
Not
I don't recall that.
not to the length of time. No, I haven't.
3 weeks? That I didn't know. 3
I didn't-
weeks.
Yeah, and the other thing also that's very strange is that there are these amber alerts or red alerts or weather alerts that can just go on your phone, just as happened when that supposedly nuclear attack from North Korea was coming in. Everyone's phone went off with those alerts.
You don't have to have internet service to get those amber alerts. It totally bypasses any of that. It should be able to work no matter what.
So an Amber Alert went out the day after the fire. If you remember, they blocked us in the day of the fire. You couldn't leave West Maui. You could leave, but you couldn't come back in, right? So if I went that afternoon to go get supplies, and when I got to the other side, there was a police blockade there, and I said, "Hey, can I go to Costco, get some stuff, and come back?" And they said no. So obviously I didn't leave because I didn't want to be away from my family. So, but my point is that you were unable to get into West Maui. You couldn't come into West Maui whatsoever, and that was also the case for many, many days, including the press. So I got calls from major press organizations, Epoch News, and different mainstream media people that were sitting at Ma'alaya, over on the other side at the roadblock, and had a legitimate press pass, and they could not come in to Maui, and they eventually left and they went away. But I get back to my original question, Paul. Was there any mention of the cell phone and Wi-Fi and LTE blackout the day of the fire and for the 3 weeks following? Was that mentioned?
I don't know about the 3 weeks to follow because I haven't read that before, but there was some mention of some of the cell phone service being down. But again, it's not anything that went into specifics because some areas had cell phone service, some didn't. So again, and there's 5 different carriers in Lahaina, from what I understand, And so we were trying to get some specific information from all of the carriers in terms of when the service actually went out for each one of them.
So,
And we're still trying to get that data.
So the reason I'm pointing this out isn't just because I want to make everyone aware that we had no communication. Of course, one of the reasons my channel blew up is because a client of mine had a Starlink. I didn't even know what a Starlink was. He said he's got one in his garage in Laniapoco, and I'm welcome to it. So I started providing internet service for people out of the back of my truck. And then I started, doing live transmissions on my channel, which is why my channel blew up, because I'm like the only guy that's like telling the world what's going on here. But imagine you're trying to warn somebody about danger, right? You have this fire that is like blazing towards them, and you want to let them know to get out of Dodge. Well, you only have so many ways you can communicate with people, right? Well, obviously a cell phone is a major way to do that. Those didn't work. And also the alarm, the text messages didn't work. But the next day, and I think we can find proof of this, an Amber Alert did actually go out because they were trying to stop people from trying to leave West Maui because they changed the whole rules. They said we could leave, and then they changed their mind, and they sent out an Amber Alert warning about a traffic accident. I just remember that. But again, we were all receiving messages, but you couldn't send anything out. I received hundreds and thousands of text messages that I couldn't respond to, which was very bizarre. But a gentleman reached out to me, back to the weapon that was used, and he reached out to me from Germany. He was a scientist, and he basically told me, he goes, I have been tracking the FTC permits, and he goes, he noticed that all the major cell phone companies applied to use a different wavelength, or I wrote it down here somewhere, but a different transmission, because the bandwidth or the frequency in which they were operating in no longer worked, basically. And that's why when you saw the emergency cell towers go up on the bypass, right when you come down Kiave, they were up in that high point right there. I'd joke around. I would stand underneath the big Verizon advertisement, and you still didn't have cell phone service underneath their emergency tower. It wasn't until they got permission to work on this new frequency. So somebody postulated that there could be something wrong with that frequency because of something that occurred that basically blocked the cell phones for whatever reason. But it took a very, very long time, even once the towers, the emergency towers were set up, that we had any ability to communicate on the west side of Maui. And that to me is very, very debilitating. And to me, it seemed like an intentional blackout from both the media and from just being able to communicate person to person. But I want people to know as well that, to this day, right? What is today? The 23rd of July, 2024, almost a year after. To this day, you still cannot take photos. You cannot stop on the bypass. You cannot go into Lahaina town. They've got checkpoint Charlies everywhere. There's still a black construction fence, dust fence that's up around. I think they spent $5 or $6 million right away to put up this black construction fence, but it's still not accessible to the general public in any way, shape, or form. And if you go there, and I've got it on video, I went there specifically and asked the question, hey, what law says I can't go in here? And nobody at those checkpoints can quote any ordinance or anything. They draw a complete blank as to why is it that you can't go into the town. What law says we can't go into that town? It includes homeowners. Homeowners can't go in there unless they have a placard. It's only for a few minutes, and they're supposed to be escorted. So you're talking about doing this investigation, but the evidence is being transported to the dump as we speak. So by the time you maybe get around to having the funding to do an investigation, there's not going to be anything there to investigate. It's all going to be gone because no one can go into that town right now. A third-party investigator cannot go into that town right now. You can't go into that town right now unless you're under the cover of someone else's pass, but you're not supposed to be there.
Well, we have gone in. We have gone in about 15 times under the cover of other people's pass, so that we could start gathering this data and information. Because I agree that a lot of whatever's there is being just carted away. So our time is limited in terms of where we can actually get the data and information. I look at comparing this in some ways to 9/11 when, again, they blocked off everything and they had different workers come in and they shipped off the steel right away to Japan to get reprocessed in China. It's like, again, we're dealing with something that we've had an opportunity to go into the burn zone enough to see that, wait a minute, this is not a natural fire. We have enough data and information, I think, that we can show that there are a lot of smoking guns that we can look at in terms of potential cause of this. Bruce, do you want to say anything else? Because you've been in there with me in the burn zone a bunch of times.
Well, I'm always looking at what technologies could have done this. Now that we have anomalies, but how could that be explained? And the patterns, like in the cars, where cars are burned in fields where there's nothing else around it that could have ignited it, other than a potential flying ember, is irrational. And it looks more like some sort of technology was used from above in order to do it. And this plasma wave technology that we call one type of directed energy weapon is able to do that very thing. It again, by its nature, acting similar like lightning, lightning is plasma energy. It is directed towards something with mass in it, which is why you see a house burnt, but then the children's plastic playhouse right next to it's just fine. Where you see the house is burnt, but the trees around it are not burnt. And we see this same situation in other fires around the world. It's not just here. So, the way that, for instance, a big one and obvious is in Quebec.
Chile.
Chile, but in Quebec, there were like 36 fires that started simultaneously, as you can see from satellite images, in an area there was no drought or no reason for fires to happen. And it's very easy with this technology we have these days to be able to ignite a fire from a plane. You can just go, boop, 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 boop. You got 36 fires ignited, no problem, really easy. We see this technology being used these days. We see this technology being used.
We have it on top of Haleakala.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. And again, there's so many different technologies that are available for this type of thing. We look at what the contractors have. And for example, there's this one drone called Morpheus that can only 6 feet long, and it can go over 100 miles an hour, and it can emanate microwaves that's 1 million times stronger than the microwave in your house. And again, when we look at that body, again, it looks at there could be microwave that could have affected it. So there could be an array of different types of technologies that were used. Again, when we look at the CIA and their black ops, there's so many things that are not even being displayed. We're just getting some of the stuff from Lockheed Martin and other contractors that are saying, here, this is available, come buy our weaponry. And again, there's stuff, though, that is top secret that we don't know about that, again, could use a lot of different types of energy weapons. So again, the only thing we can do at this point in time really is to gather the data information, look at all the different anomalies, the emissions, what does not sink in well at this point in time. I think that's our main focus. And as we do that, then we can get more experts to come and help us. And again, if there are experts out there who can connect with us on these different things, we greatly appreciate it. So there's a lot we can keep on doing in this investigation. So is there any other questions you had, Eric?
Actually, I do. Just a couple more. So was there any mention in the reports that the day of the fire, the emergency manager or emergency management's director was not on the island, that the fire chief was also not on the island, governor, of course, was not on the island, and then also that the fire chief that was in charge that day was recently arrested for, I was going to say, I think it was
solicitation of a minor.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't want to say the wrong thing. But And also, was there any mention that the emergency management director used to be the assistant to Mayor Arakawa? I think it was his chief of staff, and that he had no experience as a emergency management director, and that he passed up a whole bunch of other guys to get that job. And the same would be with the fire chief. The fire chief was newly hired. He was the same the police chief. The same police chief was in charge of the Vegas shooting incident that day. And he also was hired after passing up a bunch of other guys that normally they hire from within. He comes in from out of state, and they actually passed a law because there used to have to be a resident of the state for a certain period of time to be the police chief, and they changed the law specifically to accommodate this particular police chief, and that also he was the coroner, and that's against the law as well. You can't have the police chief also be the coroner. Were any of these things mentioned at all in these reports? I know I just blasted a whole bunch of facts at you, but did any of that stuff come up? Because I think it's all pertinent.
Well, it is all pertinent, very, very pertinent. And some of it was mentioned, but again, when you start to go into the specifics, though, of, the Arakawa and that type of connection that occurred with that person who was in charge of the emergency, and again, you look at the police chief. That is very suspicious. I was on the Charter Commission when that occurred and got involved with some of the police commission and their discussions and stuff, and it was very bizarre. And it was pushed through in a way that didn't seem natural. So again, there are many things that coincide with questions that we have, and that's why we're still investigating. And that's why we have our core team there's 8 of us who continually are digging and looking into the facts and information. We will keep on putting out different reports. Our next one that we're going to be putting out will be on the weather. When we look at the many anomalies, there's really 7 major anomalies associated with the weather that we'll be going into in that report. So we will keep on digging and trying to get to the truth. What we're looking at right now at this point in time is to have the court of public opinion and get the message out in that way. And Eric, you were so pivotal in that, getting the information out early on. And thank God your friend gave you the Starlink, because again, that really started to put out the information that, wait a minute, this is not a natural fire. There's something that's off here, and that we have to look at it. And you started that questioning right off the bat. And again, it's continued, but again, even though it's subsided quite a bit in terms of mainstream media, we're going to continue going after it. But if we can, people can spread these types of videos on the investigations that are going on, the data that we're collecting, and how this does not fit any type of normal framework for fires. And this is, again, a great suspicion that as we do that and get more and more of that and the community behind us more and more, I think we'll start to get some momentum and actually gain some power. And especially as we do that, we'll be looking at doing legal types of explorations into this also. There's several avenues. There are 4 avenues. Kathy just talked about one in terms of our FOIA request and writ of mandamus. We have others that we could use, like common law and other areas that we can talk about as we develop those.
Okay. And I also just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention that the next step, I believe, in their strategy, if you will, excuse me, I got a dry throat going here, is, if you, matter of fact, right before we went live here, I was actually attending the Maui Planning Commission meeting today, because the next step in their plan is to completely cripple the economy of Maui. And the way they plan on doing that is they plan on making short-term vacation rentals illegal. And that's specifically 7,100 vacation rentals that are apartment zone. It's the ones that they're picking on, which is the biggest group of vacation rentals. And I think this is a trend you're seeing in other parts of the world as well. But in such a small community such as Maui, I believe what you're going to see if they're successful in doing this is that you're going to see economic havoc. So there was some really great testimony that was given today by people that are in opposition. But one of the most succinct explanations was, in the last 5 years, this would be the 3rd major blow to Maui. The first major blow would be the C word, where we were all shut down and couldn't travel here, and just the economic mayhem that came out of the C word. The second one, obviously, would be the fire, and now the third one would be shutting down of vacation rentals. So everyone that's listening to this, I would really encourage you to let your voice be heard, to share what they're trying to do here on Maui, and realize that it's Lahaina strong, Maui strong, the community foundation, whatever, where all that money went. Those are the people that are in favor of shutting down vacation rentals. And if you just think about it logically, let's just say it did happen, and now all of a sudden you have got this big, massive pool of condos that you can no longer short-term vacation rent. How does that translate into affordable housing? Even if you cut the price in half for these condos, the average condo on Maui is $1 million for a one-bedroom. Even if they was cut in half, the carrying cost on that would still be $4,000 or $5,000 a month if the price was half. So how does that open up more long-term housing for locals? I mean, we're talking about locals that don't make very much money. They can't qualify for a $500,000 mortgage, let alone the insurance cost has gone up by, in many cases, 10, 15, 20-fold, just the insurance. Then you have the HOA, you have all the seawalls that they're not allowing them to rebuild, but you have a lot of expenditures that are just not affordable. So it's almost like they're not just barking up the wrong tree, they're cutting down, or they're proposing to cut down the very financial infrastructure that supports our tax base, that supports jobs, and they're sending a message out to the world that says, Maui doesn't welcome you. We don't want you here. And it's just a very small group of people that have been given the microphone that are sending this message out there, but it does not represent what the Hawaiian people that I know. It does not represent the local people that I know. And it does not represent the people of this island. Yet for some reason, they're able to leverage this very, I believe, hateful message. But if they're successful in doing this, I believe you're going to see the next tragedy hit this island, which is economic devastation.
Well, again, another factor into the housing situation is the amount of money FEMA has put in. And they're paying $12,000 for a house that then affects rental for residents also on a significant level. So again, it seemed like almost a formula to make it so that residents can't afford to live here anymore.
Right.
Making the housing to be very, very difficult to get any type of affordable housing. Even though there are some things that are in the works right now on the county level. Again, it is a crisis that we faced for quite some time, but this certainly has escalated things significantly.
Right, and the irony is that the short-term vacation rentals have been funding the affordable housing, pot, if you will, pile of money, which they haven't been doing anything with to create affordable housing since 1990. So the very economic engine that feeds the affordable housing fund, they are proposing to get rid of, and also supports, thousands of jobs and millions of dollars in tax revenue. But you watch, just like when they took all the debris from Lahaina town and they dumped it right by the ocean in Oluwalu, and they didn't listen to any of the community feedback, and they had hours and days of testimony. You watch. They're going to listen to all this oppositional testimony and all this paid for, I believe, testimony that's for it, and they're just going to go ahead and pass it. So I pray that doesn't happen, but it's very scary to think that they're going to turn this island into a place that no one's going to be here except the elites. That's truly where I believe this is headed. And also,
you're right on that. I said you're right on that because the bigger question here, probably everybody from everything will say, well, why would they do that? What's the bigger picture? And before I moved to Maui many years ago, I knew somebody who was in the know. I'm not going to say their name or anything, but would know. And they said, didn't you know Maui is slated to be the next international banking center for the elite, like a Monte Carlo or a Switzerland or something like that. And, it didn't make sense until I saw the land grab, what apparently looked to me like a land grab going on in Maui to knock out all of the old Hawaiians, take or harbors take over. And so, I don't think we've seen the end of it. I think they're slowly, orchestrating their plan and to drive out a lot of people. They don't come back. I mean, just the fact is that very few, if any, building permits have been allowed in there. They're just trying to wait people out. So they get tired and finally say, well, I'll just sell my land because I've got to live. I got to lead a life.
Yeah.
And that's what they're forcing people to do. They wait it out just like lawfare,
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense because, again, when you look at Kauai, for example, after Aniki, within 1 month, they've had affordable housing up and going and really supporting the residents there. Here, we're 10 months and we have 36 permits that have been put out so far. And there's a lot of issues still with affordable housing that we're dealing with. So again, if there was a major plan of changing the residency so that it's just the ultra rich playground, well, many of this coincides with it. But again, as we get the data and information out, as we put out the facts, as we get the community and other people behind us in terms of really creating a collective consciousness about what's truly happening, not only here in Maui, as Bruce mentioned, but also in other areas throughout the planet right now. Again, I think that as we uncover the truth here in Maui, it'll also help uncover the truth in a lot of other areas there where there's so many similar incidences happening all over the place. So again, that's why it's so important, I think, for us to do this digging, not only with the implications here, but also on a global level.
Agreed. Yep. Well, it's interesting. One of the testifiers that appeared today in the Maui County Planning Commission was the attorney for Airbnb. And the attorney for Airbnb gave this testimony, and he was actually the former attorney general for the state of Hawaii. He is the former bar president for the Bar Association here in Hawaii. So he's a pretty well, spoken individual. And he said what they're attempting to do with this law is completely 100% unconstitutional. So it's interesting if you think about that for a moment. In my opinion, everything that they're doing is not according to the law of the land. They're basically usurping, what we would think is normal, doing business in our country, and they're not. So what I've heard from other sources is like they will push it until you take them to court, until you make them follow the law that they're supposed to be following, which is the Constitution of the United States, which is the Constitution of the state. And it isn't until you actually hold them accountable in a court of law that they'll stop. But they will basically go until, they'll just keep going. And so I think it's very interesting when you look at even what's happening with Kahana Sunset, a condo that wants to rebuild their seawall. Seawalls have been being rebuilt on the west side of Maui since they were building seawalls. They don't last forever. They need to be repaired. They need to be rebuilt. But now all of a sudden, you can't repair your seawall anymore. And someone told me the mayor just mentioned this a few days ago. Well, that is also, there's no basis of law for that. So what I think what we're seeing happen here is they're pushing the envelope. They're literally going into these areas and they're trying to do things that are not constitutional. And it's really scary. So I believe the more that we are making other people aware of this, and the more that organizations like yours are funded, so that we have an ability to fight back and to do something about it, because it's literally David versus Goliath. And but we need more people to be activated. We need more people to help. We need more people to care. We need more people to give and support. We're just a ragtag group of people here doing what we can outside of our normal jobs, trying to survive on this island. But we need everybody to do their part. So at a very minimum, if you could share the video, if you could subscribe to the channel, if you could go to Maui Community Investigation Group's website, I've got a link in the description. We're also doing a program called Switch for Lahaina, where you can support local families with a job that we've created, an opportunity called Switch for Lahaina. Please check that out. But we're just doing our little tiny part, not knowing if it's going to make a difference, but praying to God that it does, and that there's somebody out there listening. There's somebody out there listening that's got maybe some expertise or some influence, or they've got a louder speaker than we have, but they care. They love our country. They love our state. They love our island. They love human beings, and people have been victimized in this tragedy. People have lost their lives. People have lost their homes. This is like real. And there needs to be accountability, and there needs to be answers. There needs to be truth. And we can't let this tragedy turn into the next tragedy and the next tragedy and the next tragedy. We need help. So this is a cry. This is a cry for help to you people out there in YouTube land. We love you. Much aloha. We thank you for paying attention and caring, but we got to keep fighting. And thank you guys for everything that you've done so far. You've been so diligent, and I know I haven't always been available, but I appreciate you for sharing your videos with me and doing what you're doing to make a difference for this community. And I just pray that it goes where it's supposed to go. I believe we do have a God that is in charge and is going to help, and that the bad guys don't win. That's my message. The bad guys, whoever they are, you're out there, you're not going to win. Period.
Thank you so much, Eric. I greatly appreciate you're able to share with us and put the message out. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you guys. I appreciate everything everything that you've done. If you have questions, you can always put those in the comments. We'll do our best to answer. Of course, please go to the Maui Community Investigation website. You can reach out directly, I believe, on your website. I believe there's a petition. Is the petition still there that they can sign?
Yes, it is. And if you sign the petition also, you'll get a regular newsletter that will be sending out. And the petition is very important as we start to do our legal phase to show that.
And you can
there is
donate
support.
to our cause too. Yeah, you can on the website. You can donate to our cause. So we can pay for these reports and soil sample reports and everything else. And legal things. So yes, we appreciate anything you can give us.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay, well, we're coming up on the 2-hour mark here, so I think we need to go take a bio break and get back to work. But I want to thank you guys so much, and please, if you are watching this, please share the video. The shadow ban is real, unfortunately, and we will come back again with another update and a meeting. I'm sure we'll do this again in the future. And I think, Paul, the next one we're going to do might be actually from the town of Lahaina, if you can get us in there again, and that might be a good opportunity to take people in and show them some actual stuff on the ground.
Let's do that. Let's get into the burn zone and just go give an overview of where it's at this point in time. I think that'll be very interesting. I love doing that with you, Eric.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Well, much aloha. Thank you, Bruce, Paul, Kathy, Steve. Appreciate you guys. We shall return. We don't know where, we don't know when, but we can promise you one thing. It'll be with you, the most aloha-infused audience on planet Earth, and from what I believe to be the most beautiful place, the best lifestyle on Earth, Maui, Hawaii. There's a reason why they want this place, right? Because it is Maui no Kauai, and it always will be.